Hey climbers, and welcome to chapter 2 of this Intro to Bouldering course. In this chapter, we're going to cover 10 tips for you as a new climber getting started. 5 of these tips are going to be technical tips to help you improve your skills on the wall, and then 5 will be practical tips, things that aren't necessarily technique that will help you improve as a climber in the sport. After that, we'll go ahead and complete 5 boulders together on the wall so I can walk you through those in detail. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, the first technical tip that I want to talk about today is placing the tip of your shoe. So why do we do this and how does it help us as climbers? So let's go ahead and start with this. So as you can see on this shoe, I've drawn a line here of kind of the main contact zone of where I'm going to be placing my shoe onto holds. The reason we place in this front portion of the shoe is not only because the shoe is designed to help us drive force through that area and support our foot as we do that, but also because this allows us to move our ankle in a certain way around the wall. So when we place the tip of our shoe, it allows us to not only pivot our ankle 180 degrees around a hold, but also to stand up through a full range of motion off of that toe. So if you are trying on shoes for the first time, you want to make sure that you're in a shoe that you can stand up on your tippy toes in. If you can't, then you want to make sure that you're either upsizing or downsizing, depending on whether that shoe is too big or too small, to help you feel like you can stand comfortably in that area while the shoe is kind of supporting your foot. So first tip being, make sure you place the tip of your shoe. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the next one. Okay, technical tip number 2 is to watch your feet place on climbing holds. In the previous tip, we talked about placing just the tip of your shoe onto climbing holds, and now we want to think about watching ourselves do that. As a new climber, you might start to feel a little panicked on the wall as you start to get a little pumped or run out of energy, and so you'll start to just look for the handholds and where you want to move next. But we want to make sure that we're not forgetting about the feet, because the feet are really what's driving us up the wall. So make sure that you watch each of your feet place on the footholds exactly where you want them. As you get better as a climber, and as you climb the grades in the sport, you're going to be demanded precision a lot more. So this is a great way to start building those habits early on in the sport so that you can excel as you start to climb the grades. All right, let's go ahead and jump into technical tip number 3. Okay, technical tip number 3 is to hang off of your arms and stand off of your feet. In climbing, if we think about trying to pull ourselves up the wall with our arms, it's going to be a lot harder than if we were to try to stand up using our legs. Our legs are much larger and much stronger muscles than our arm muscles, so we want to let those ones handle pushing our weight up the wall and then use our arms to keep us from falling back off of the wall. So ultimately, if we are placing our feet precisely on these holds using the tips of our shoe, we should be in a good spot to press hard through that shoe and stand up the wall rather than having to pull up the wall. So again, hang off of your arms and stand on your feet. Okay, technical tip number 4 is to try to solve the boulder problem from the ground rather than on the wall. As a new climber, you might be anxious to just get on the wall and start climbing, but that is a great way to kind of just waste energy and not get a lot of learning out of the experience. So as a new climber, you might be limited in the amount of work that you can do in a session, and so we want to make sure that we're getting the most out of every one of the attempts that we have on the wall. The best way to make sure that we're getting the most out of our attempts is to have a plan going into that attempt. This will allow us to basically reflect on that plan after, whether it was successful or not, and come up with a different strategy moving forward, depending on how it went. So if you can solve the problem from the ground, think about all of the moves from start to finish, and then get up on the wall and execute, you'll be saving a lot more energy and likely do the climb a lot quicker than had you been problem solving on the wall. So try to solve the boulder from the ground rather than on the wall. Let's go ahead and jump into the last technical tip for the day. Okay, tip number 5 is to try multiple methods. As a new climber, when you're trying climbs for the first time, you might only see one possible solution to that climb, and that's okay. But something that's really important as you grow as a climber is to grow your skill set, not just your strength. And the way that we can do that is by practicing the same climb using multiple methods or multiple beta. Beta is basically the method we use to solve a climb. So when we use different beta, we basically grow our skill set or give ourselves the opportunity to learn new movements that we can then apply later down the line when we're either trying harder climbs or trying to flash a climb, which means do it first try. If we can try multiple methods and learn the different movement patterns that our body can perform on the wall, we'll basically build intuition as a climber too. This is how you can understand where to be on the wall before you need to be there. This will help you ultimately climb a lot faster as you begin to progress as a climber too. So without further ado, let's jump into the practical tips for the day. Okay, it's time to jump into some of the practical tips for the day. So tip number 6 is to chase skills instead of chasing grades. As a new climber, it can be really easy to get hyper-fixated on chasing grades to improve at the sport, but something that you need to understand is that the grading scale is not linear. So while you might make quick progress in this sport to start, it's likely that you'll hit a plateau due to skill rather than strength. So it's easy to get stuck in the trap that you just need to get stronger to get better at climbing, but that's not the case. I want you to understand that climbing ultimately is a skill sport. The harder climbs we climb, the more our skill set is tested, not our strength. So strength is definitely a component to climbing harder boulders, but skill set is really going to be the thing that separates a low-level climber from a high-level climber. When we have more skill, we have the ability to apply the strength that we have to the wall more effectively. So the more skill you have, the less strength that you technically need. And so this is a great thing to pursue as a new climber. Building skill takes a lot longer than building strength, so I think it's a really great idea to spend the majority of your time focused on building skills rather than building strength. So without further ado, let's jump into tip number 7. Okay, tip number 7 is to focus on moves that are technically challenging for you rather than physically challenging for you. Again, the majority of your time as a new climber should be spent on skill acquisition, not strength acquisition. Getting stronger is about as easy as it gets, but getting better skill-wise is a lot harder and takes a lot more focus and intention in practice. So the best way to do this is to seek moves on the wall that are technically challenging for you, not physically challenging for you. A great way to think about this is finding a move that can take you 15 or 20 attempts to do, but within those attempts, you don't really lose much energy. If a move is physically challenging for you, where that's the limiting factor, you should really only be able to attempt that move 3 to 4 times kind of max before you're kind of lost energy to the point where you can't try that move. So we don't want to focus on that stuff. We want to focus on skill acquisition. So the best way to do that is, again, to find moves that are technically challenging for you, not physically challenging. So look for moves that are a couple grades below your limit, meaning, they shouldn't be that hard intensity-wise, but they should demand a lot out of your technical proficiency in order to either complete the move or solve the problem. So let's go ahead and jump into tip number 8. Okay, tip number 8 for new climbers is to focus on general strength gains rather than specific strength gains. Again, as a new climber, I think your time is best spent on the wall to make progress because you're going to be not only training your technical proficiency, but you will also be training your strength or the physical components of you as a climber as well. If you do decide to do a bit of training off the wall, I think your time is best spent doing general strength and conditioning rather than specific strength and conditioning. If we can raise your general level of physical preparedness, that will ultimately help you get more out of your sessions on the wall. We don't want to be spending a ton of time as new climbers off the wall unless we have very limited access to a gym. So if you can only make it to a gym maybe once a week, then I think doing some more specific training off the wall could be advantageous. But if you are someone who can make it into the gym multiple times a week to do training, all of your time as a new climber should be spent on the wall trying to get the technical gains and the strength gains there rather than in the weight room. So you have limited resources to contribute to making progress as a climber early on. Your work capacity is typically just a little bit lower than somebody with a little bit more experience or who's a little bit more trained. So with that limited amount of energy that you can contribute to making progress, we want to make sure that that's spent doing things that are really going to move the needle in terms of performance for us. So as a new climber, spending your energy on the wall is going to be much better than spending your energy in the weight room. If you do decide to go into the weight room, though, focus on compound lifts, working with heavy loads, multiple muscle groups, rather than doing isolation work. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the last 2 tips here. Okay, tip number 9 is to not rush the strength gains. Strength is a neurological adaptation that we're trying to make. So basically, we're trying to get our brain to recruit more muscles to produce force for us. The best way to train that neurological adaptation from brain to muscle is to do that heavy lifting or whatever that heavy or high intensity effort is consistently over a long period of time. So it's not about forcing as much work as you can do into a short period of time. It's actually producing those efforts of intensity over a long period of time, multiple months. And so when we can do that, we start to train that coordination of the brain and the body together. So strength is a long game. There's no way that you can really rush strength gains because of the adaptation that's trying to occur. Fitness, on the other hand, happens a lot quicker, but fitness also fades a lot quicker. Strength takes forever to build and takes a long time to fade, whereas fitness can come and go in an instant, almost. So if we're thinking about making progress as new climbers, we want to focus on getting into the gym consistently and building that trend of training. That trend is going to make the biggest difference in us improving strength-wise in the sport. So if we were to do, consistent training for the course of 6 weeks and then stop, and then not do any more of that training moving forward, we're going to lose that coordination of the brain to the muscles. Whereas if we were to do a specific effort maybe once or twice a week and then do it again the next week and then the next week after that, we're continuing to build that coordination of the brain to the muscles, and that's exactly what we want for strength gains. So as much as you can, think about not rushing the process for strength. It is a slow game, so just think about building that trend or that consistency. Okay, tip number 10 and the final tip for this chapter: don't rush the journey and trust the process. Everybody gets into climbing at a different point in their life. They come in with different strength, different skill set, different experience, and so their journey is going to be different. Don't compare your journey to others. Use their journey to draw inspiration from, or use your journey to inspire others, but don't compare yours directly to another's. It can be a tough game to play mentally in the sport. Okay, the first climb that we're going to try here is this black V0. So I see the start tag here, and I see 2 holds right next to it, which is kind of indicating my start hands here. So both of these are covered in chalk and are pretty big holds, so I can tell that they're going to be our hand holds rather than something like this, which is going to be a foot hold, even though it's pretty close to the start tag. So looking below me, I see a couple feet here, and then a big black foot there and there as I start to move this way around the climb. Now I'm going to look for the finish hold. I can see, indicated by that tiny black circular tag, that big hold is going to be our finish hold. So we want to make sure that we're matching 2 hands to that hold to end the climb today. So start hands here. I'm going to have my feet below me. Likely I'll have one spread out and one over here to the right. And then I think, personally, I'm going to move my left hand up to that one first. And then I might move my left hand again, what's called a bump. And then I'd go right hand, left hand, left hand, and then to the finish. So let's go ahead and try it out. Before we jump onto this climb, this gives me a really good opportunity to talk about one of the tips that we covered today, which is hanging on your arms and standing on your feet. So we want to think about doing this immediately when we get onto the wall. So let me go ahead and show you what it looks like when we are hanging on our arms and standing on our feet. And then after that, I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like when we're pulling up on our arms and not loading our feet as effectively as we could. So let's check it out. Okay, first climb done. Let's go ahead and try this V1 behind me here, this red one. So I'm going to be focusing on the same principles here, making sure that I'm watching my feet place, I'm placing with the tip of my toe, and that I'm hanging off of my arms and standing on my feet. Let's go ahead and sequence this one together, or talk about the beta, so we can problem solve this one from the ground rather than on the wall. Okay, next up is this red V1 here. I see a start tag here, and the hold next to it looks like it's covered in chalk. So we're going to say that this is our 2-hand start here. So I'll place 2 hands there, and then I'll get my feet up off the ground before I move on to the next hand hold. From there, I'll start climbing left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand. Up here, I'm going to be allowed to use these what are called volumes, these massive gray holds here. These help the setters change basically the angles of the wall and create different terrain for us to climb. So you can think of it like a hold, but really think of it like a texture of the wall or an angle of the wall. So these are our volumes that we'll be using. We want to make sure that we're avoiding these little black screw-ons, as those aren't a part of our climb. And then we'll get up the climb and we're looking for our finish hold. So we see a red tag up there next to that final hold. So we'll look to match 2 hands to that finish hold. Let's go ahead and try this one out. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this red V2. So starting, we're going to look for our start tag, and we see 2 holds here. So this is going to be a 2-hand start on separate holds rather than on the same hold. From there, I'm going to focus on getting my feet off the ground before I move on to the next position. Here, it looks like there's only one good foot for me to place, so I'm going to place 1 foot there, and then I'm just going to press my other foot somewhere on the wall. This is still considered a controlled start. We need to have control of the hand holds here and our feet to be off the ground. They don't necessarily need to be on holds to consider it a clean start. From there, I'm likely going to move my left hand first and then right, and I'm going to start working my way up the wall here. I see my finish hold there indicated by the finish tag, so I'm going to be sure to match 2 hands there. Once I get to the top, it looks like this isn't too far, So instead of just dropping down from the wall, I'm actually just going to use those down climb jugs that are right next to it. These gray holds here with arrows, those indicate that we can use those to climb down the wall. So if you're a new climber and kind of want to save your knees and your low back a little bit as you get into the sport, I'd say down climb the climb if you can once you're done, and then jump off the wall rather than just jumping off from the top. So let's go ahead and try this V2. Okay, climb number 4 is right behind me, and this is going to be a slab climb. Slab climbing demands a lot more out of your feet than it does your hands. This wall angle will basically put you in a position where all your weight is on your feet. So let's talk about the tips that we're going to use in order to set ourselves up for success in this slab climb. First and foremost is going to be watching your foot place. When we watch our foot place on a hold, we're building confidence in that placement, something that we're going to have to use later. So we want to make sure that we have confidence in that foot if we need to stand up off of it. Next up is how we place that foot on that hold. If we place the tip of our shoe, this is going to allow us to get the most out of our shoe and our ankle's range of motion. We can pivot our shoe 180 degrees around the hold and then stand fully up off of that foot too. Really important for slab climbing. The last thing to think about is hanging off of your arms and standing on your feet, mainly standing on your feet here. So with slab climbs, since the wall angle is falling away from us rather than overhanging us, we're gonna have all the weight on our feet rather than our hands. So making sure that we're placing those precisely in a way that they can move fully, and then making sure that we're loading them will make them useful for us to stand up off of. So let's go ahead and talk about this climb behind me. Okay, so right here we have a V1. It looks like we have 2 start holds here next to our start tag, so we'll be doing a 2-hand start. I've got some feet below me here, so I'll be using these to start. And it looks like our finish hold is actually indicated by that blue tag at the top here. So another finish hold instead of the top of the wall. So I'm gonna start here. I'm thinking I'm gonna go left hand first and then right hand up there and continue to work my way up the wall until we get to a finish hold that we can match. So let's go ahead and try this one out. Okay, the last climb of the day is an overhung red V2. Let's go ahead and talk this one through. Okay, final climb of the day is this V2 here. I see my start tag and a hold right next to it. This hold is covered in a ton of rubber and chalk, so this makes me think that it's gonna be both hand and a foot later. So 2 hands to start here. I'll get my feet off the ground and then we'll start to move left up this climb here. I see my finish hold up there indicated by a finish tag, and so I'm gonna be sure to match 2 hands there. It looks like that I have a volume here that I might be using, so just want to make sure that I'm looking for this, and I see another foot below me there. So a couple of things to talk about here in terms of the technique or the tips from earlier. We want to make sure that we are hanging off of our arms and standing on our feet. We want to be watching our feet place, and then we would want to be placing the tip of our toe. So let's go ahead and do this final climb today.